everybody. Welcome to AlManakh's first video podcast. My name is Mariam AlSaad. I'm AlManakh's founder, and today we're going to be talking about energy systems in Kuwait and what they are, how we can improve them and make them more sustainable, and why we need to make them more sustainable for the Kuwaiti market. And joining me today is the only person that I could find in Kuwait that loves talking about energy more than I do. It's energy engineer Ahmad Taher. So welcome, Ahmed.
Hi, Mariam. Thank you for having me.
So today what we're going to be talking about is basically just energy systems, and that topic in itself might be a bit too heavy for some people, but it's actually really simple and it's actually really interesting. And so energy systems in general are just essential elements of infrastructure, and they provide us with access to energy services like electricity and heating and cooling, most importantly. And they help us improve our quality of life and provide us with security and opportunities for development. So it's really important that they are efficient and reliable and sustainable. And when we look at Kuwait's energy system, it's 100% dependent on fossil fuels for energy generation, with 59% going for oil and 41% for natural gas. And the energy system in Kuwait is not as efficient as it could be. And another thing about it is that it's actually responsible for more than 95% of the country's total CO2 emissions, which is also quite higher than the average emissions per capita for the world, for many countries in the world, for countries in the European Union, for countries in the Middle East, and these emissions are also expected to increase. And the disadvantages associated with CO2 emissions, obviously we all know that CO2 emissions cause, well, they're the leading cause and the leading driver for climate change, and they cause an increase in air pollution. And specifically when we talk about the Kuwaiti context, Kuwait has really high air pollution levels. They're 6 times higher than the recommended average, and this has a lot of health and well-being implications. It has a lot of impacts on the health of members of the civil society in Kuwait. And so when we talk about why, so obviously it needs to change. This needs to change. The energy system cannot provide this amount of negative impacts on not just the health of members within civil society, but on Kuwait's economy as well, and on the environment. So when we talk about how we can improve this system, we're going to have to go in to talk about the current energy policies and the current policy making that's being done. And so I just wanted to get your opinion on the current policies and how we can improve them, and why they are the current state that why they're in the current state that they're in.
Personally, I believe that Kuwait's energy policy could be thought of in that it has 2 segments: the international market segment and the local market segment. For the international market, our policy is plain and simple: to sell as much crude oil and refined oil products as we can for the highest possible price, which is completely understandable. But for our local markets, our policy is to switch our power generation feedstock from oil to gas, natural gas, for both environmental reasons and to sell the remaining oil that we used to use to produce electricity back onto the international markets, and to increase the efficiencies of our systems to reduce our power consumption, basically, and also to import liquefied natural gas, LNG, for use by the Ministry of Electricity to produce power, and to also be used by KMPC's refineries to produce better refined products to sell on the international markets, and also to make renewable energy account for 15% of our energy mix by 2030. Let's start off, of course, with the renewable energy parts. 15% it's not high enough. It doesn't capture Kuwait's potential when it comes to the amount of chances that we have here in Kuwait to utilize when it comes to renewable energy. For example, solar, which is by far the most abundant that we have here in Kuwait, we still haven't explored it that much. Like, for example, if you look at the second phase of the Shagaya park, it's the plan is to go for 1.5 gigawatts.
Okay, so why do you think that there's so little ambition on their end? Like when they announce these percentages, 15%, including renewables. Why do you think they're starting off so small? Is it that there's no expertise? Is it that there's no? Well, we know that there is a lot of money in Kuwait, and so economics is not an issue. But why are they starting with such small percentages?
I believe that our energy policy is aimed at monetizing our oil reserves alone, and not our allocation on any of our other resources, especially in renewable energy. And like at the 15%, it's by 2030 it's a bit too low for the potential of Kuwait. Kuwait has a huge potential for renewable energy, especially solar. And whatever that could actually be done in addition, like as supporting services, whether manufacturing or exporting the products that could be manufactured here, could support building a proper green economy in Kuwait that could even rival our crude oil exports, which could actually be really, really beneficial for Kuwait, which I think Kuwait is not tackling this or thinking about going with this approach.
I think a lot of it as well is just because the current market is it's not liberalized, and it's not open to foreign investment. So there's not, the government is trying to kind of do its best, which isn't really great. It's not very ambitious, but as you said, they're just kind of trying to see what other countries are doing and implementing it in like small bits. But the reason why that's really unsustainable, and when I say unsustainable, I don't mean just environmentally, but like when we talk about how that's going to affect the efficiency of the country's like energy system. Right now, Kuwait's energy system is 40% of the country's GDP comes from oil export revenue. The country's entire economy is dependent on the export of oil, and if we don't diversify that mix of if we don't diversify our economy, basically what's going to happen is the whole country is just going to collapse as soon as there's an issue in the global oil markets. And that's happened to a lot of countries in the past. And I think what Kuwait can do is essentially look at green energy transitions that have happened in other countries and take kind of lead from that, because Norway was exactly in the same position as we were years ago, but their whole dependence was on oil revenue. But now what they've done is just turn that around completely. And I think Kuwait can take a lot of we can kind of look at what they've done and implement it. I think what could the government do basically to ensure that we do have a successful energy transition into a green energy market?
I think it goes in two separate ways. First of all, they believe, not all of them of course, but they believe that there is no way to monetize going green, that there is no financial benefit of actually building more renewable energy projects here in Kuwait. And the second part is because usually they're extremely cautious when it comes to setting up percentages such as the 15%. For example, they wait until other countries, implement them and go through them and be like, okay, cool, should actually do it this way. But what comes to mind is that other countries, when they launch ambitious projects like this, they aim to capture international market share. While we just think about, just copying, unfortunately, which affects our future, not our future. It really affects our ability to monetize renewable energy in the future. Right now, it's more about whoever can go in first and can capture as much market share as they could, but we're not looking at it that way, unfortunately.
I think the word that you said there is potential. Kuwait has a lot of potential. I think more so than some of the leading countries in the world when it comes to producing solar energy, like Spain and Morocco. And I think it's really interesting when we look at our current system and why it's in the state that it's in. Due to this, there's a lot of heavy energy subsidization. There's a non-liberalized market, and I think more importantly is that when it comes to energy policymaking, a lot of it is due to essentially politics.
Okay, and to answer this part, a liberalized energy market, a local energy market, liberalizing that has its own pros and cons. From a pro point of view, it would allow the government to reduce its subsidies and costs in managing all these power stations and the transmission and so on and so forth up until the final user. But on the other hand, it would considerably increase costs on the final user. But also, say for example, if Kuwait decides to increase the percentage of renewable energy of the energy mix, many of the producers, like say for example, if we liberalize the whole market and now you have private companies running the power generation itself, like they actually produce the energy that goes into the transmission before it reaches the final customer. If we increase our mandate of renewable energy in Kuwait, many of those producers will have to act as baseload or emergency power producers. So say for example, if we're using wind or solar and suddenly there's a sandstorm, so we'll speak to the private power producers to produce more electricity out of, say for example, natural gas or any other source of fossil fuels. And then to balance the grids, basically. Balancing the grid is a whole new issue when it comes to renewable energy. But because of this situation, because of this move, in 2021, at least 30 power suppliers in the UK went bankrupt. And I think at least 2 million people had to be rediverted to other power producers, like in the UK by the government, so they could have power for the winter. The reason why this happened was because when the UK wind turbines produced less electricity than they were supposed to, and the power producers had to increase their production of electricity through natural gas, but at the same time the prices of natural gas on the international market were extremely high, so they couldn't buy, they couldn't do anything, and they ended up going bankrupt. So these are the pros and cons when it comes to liberalizing the whole market. If we're going to do something like this, at least we'd have to have some government control over some bits and pieces of the market itself to avoid such a scenario.
The policymakers in this case essentially aren't people who are experts in energy. They're members of parliament, and they might not be very aware of the necessity of making these changes, and they might not be aware of how this can essentially improve the quality of life for everybody. And so I think what you've talked about in your publications is that what you've suggested is that we can actually introduce solar energy into the current energy system without having to make a lot of changes, without it having to affect the finance of not only the government but the people themselves that are going to be investing in these solutions. So I was just thinking, what your suggestions are in that sense.
First of all, the government should look at how much money it could actually make from switching to green. Just a general point of view, when it comes to energy, it's not just about producing electricity. Fossil fuels are also used to produce other products, even in the heavy industries. Say, for example, aluminums or steel or cement. If, for example, we switched or tried to even produce green hydrogen by a small percentage and actually provide international manufacturers with green hydrogen by attracting them to Kuwait and signing off-take agreements with them that they would take all the green hydrogen that we would produce, those companies could actually ship those products out of Kuwait to other countries who are looking for green steel, green aluminum, or green cement. like this way, we could actually Kuwait could generate more jobs, can diversify its economy. Whether it's going to tax those businesses or tax the people or tax anything, anyway, the government would actually be able to make more money. And once the government sees it this way, they'd actually find that they're able to diversify away from oil and not just depend on it, which eventually would change the country's energy policy towards something green. The whole point when it comes to green energy is to showcase how much more money people could actually make by going green. If we tell the people that's only about the environment, a lot of people are going to say, that's great, that's amazing, I love the environment. But then you have to tell them, but you're going to pay more. They're going to be like, okay, I got to think about it. But if you could actually provide them with cheap power that comes from renewable energy, could provide them with good products, you could even showcase them how they could get more jobs. By going green, they're going to be all for it. And this is the current situation we're in right now. There are multiple ways for Kuwait to make money out of this. And unfortunately, we're not looking at it this way. We only see it as as more of a PR thing than what it really is.
And what you've just said about the country being left behind, it's really gonna just cripple the country's economy, and it's going to take us more years to catch up once that train's already left. And so I think to kind of conclude on this, a lot of what you've said really makes sense because and it's very practical, it's very achievable. I think what Kuwait can do in the meantime is just try to implement these solutions that are being given by a lot of experts have spoken about, the importance to move towards a sustainable, energy market. And in terms of Kuwait, there's not been much done on this, but there's been kind of some talk about this, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation because I think it's gonna add on to that and really kind of help people understand the importance of moving towards a sustainable energy transition.
True.
So on that note, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Basically, what I suggested was building a utility scale solar energy project. By utility scale, I mean like a big PV farm, like it's what you see usually on media and stuff when somebody showcases lots and lots of photovoltaics in one place. This is what I mean by utility. The project is suggested is of the size of 14.5 gigawatts, and it would be financed in a different manner. First, you'd allow the people to not own by buying shares in the project itself. By say, for example, 11 fils per kilowatt hour of half of the amount of electricity they use per year. So say, for example, if your house uses, say, 10 megawatt hours per year, which is a really lot. In Kuwait, we use a lot more than that. Say 10 megawatt hours per year, so you're going to be paying for 5 megawatt hours per year, and you pay it monthly over 4 years. The government could use this money as part of a bigger loan that they could take from different banks, and the loan would be divided into 4 segments or 4 phases of the project, and the government would get access to each package of the loans when they start each phase. So say phase 1, they get the first package of the loan, then they start working. Once they finish phase 1 and they're about to start phase 2, they get the second package of the loan, and so on and so forth. And in my suggestion, the study itself, the loan repayments and the interest rates would be covered by the money collected from the equity that the people bought, in a certain manner that doesn't affect the current budget at all. So the government technically would not be paying anything extra or adding any more money to their current budget. And they would be able to pay back the loan and the interest rates on the loan, like to pay back the loan and interest, which is the maintenance of the loan, through the savings they would get from each phase being inaugurated. So once phase one goes on, the government could save this amount of electricity, which they would not need to pay any money for from the fossil fuels or the natural gas or whatever, and they could just use that amount that got saved to pay back the loan itself. And through the study itself, it showed that the government could actually save around 6 billion KDs over 23 years, and they could pay back the loan in say approximately 12 years. Actually, yeah, say 12 years. And
which is pretty, it's a pretty good plan if you
yeah,
think about it.
yeah, it actually saves, it kind of it helps with the whole political problem when it comes to the parliament. The parliament then, because then the people would not, they will not need to pay for higher electricity rate, because technically they own half of their usage. So after they pay that period, they don't need to pay for half of their electricity anyway, and the government could still maintain the same subsidies they have on the first half, and then they wouldn't have to go into battle basically with the parliament to increase any rates or anything. And at the same time, it opens a huge opportunity for Kuwait for other projects that could be done. Like, say for example, if the government could insist that say the third and the fourth phase, all the solar panels that would be used in those phases should be manufactured in Kuwait. It's a huge project with a huge amount of solar panels, so you could actually attract manufacturers here and generate jobs here in Kuwait and help people. At the same time, after the project is over and then the 4 phases have been implemented, you could build similar projects using government-owned companies abroad, and use the solar panels produced here in Kuwait as part of the bids that Kuwait could give the other countries. This way you could keep the factories going and still producing more green products. So they could literally make money out of this, and that was the whole point really of the study.
So what do you think could happen if the status if it's going to remain the same as it is, if there's no future investment in renewable energy, if the markets remain just as they are?
And it will be too late for us.
Yeah.
No, seriously, it will be really late for us, because then
We're already late.
We are already late, but still there's late and there's too late. We could still build stuff, go more into the market, try to sell green power to neighboring countries, for example. We could do a lot of things in the meantime and still be able to catch on with the rest of the region. But if we don't change, if we just continue in the same direction, we'll simply be too late. Eventually we'll end up buying green electricity from our neighbors, and it's going to take a lot of money out of, it's going to cost us a lot of money. From a financial point of view, going partially green, I'm not saying let's go fully green, at the moment it's not really achievable. For certain countries, for example, some countries they could achieve a high level of green energy in their power mix because they have, say for example, rivers, or they have waterfalls, or anything so they can produce hydropower. For them it makes sense, but for us, we could still go with a big percentage of renewable energy and save a lot of money and still make money on the side. If we just keep looking at renewable energy as a PR stunt, we're just going to be way too late when the whole world's economy switches and we're just left trying to sell. Kuwait could actually benefit from the high costs of power production, production of electricity, generation of electricity in some of our neighboring countries, and Kuwait could provide them with renewable energy that's generated in Kuwait. Maybe with time we'll be able to extend our network further, say for example to Europe, which has been one of the it's been on the chatter. People have been talking about it for a while, about connecting the grids of Europe to Africa, even on some of the Middle East, either through Morocco or through the north, like the north of Kuwait. So if we're able to do something like this, Kuwait could actually monetize this more. I simply hope that, inshallah, in the future, Kuwait would be able to catch on with the rest of the region, and it would be a huge benefit for the country.